Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Good morning. In session 20, we will be discussing about currency swap. In the early session, we have discussed about the management of transaction exposure, and in this process we have discussed the forward contract. Then we have discussed about currency options, interest rate swap, and today's session we will be discussing about currency swap, how currency swap can be a tool for management of transaction exposure. As I mentioned earlier, transaction exposure arises because the contractual payments which is supposed to be in the form of different foreign currency change their value with the fluctuation of exchange rate. And in this process, we have to manage the exchange rate fluctuation through different hedging product, and in the various hedging product available in the market, one such product is currency options. In the currency options, we have discussed how the derivative market play a role in management of transaction exposure. There we have discussed currency options, call and put options. This currency options, a part of the transaction exposure management, have some kind of drawback. The drawback in the form is that interest rate is borrowing and lending side, it may not help significantly, rather export receivables or import payable, it may help in a significant manner. But when borrowings or lendings are there, when companies ratings involves, when the borrowers have a preference for one market, have a privilege in another market, this currency options market may not be in a position to help them. And when current company ratings are involved, when long term borrowings are there and the borrowers are confined to one market, one country, they do not have any experience of other country, and when they want different kind of currency borrowings, in this process the currency swap helps a lot. And for this, as a transaction management tool, transaction exposure management tool, we will be discussing about currency swap market. And in this process, while discussing the various features of currency swap, we will be using the practical sides of currency swap, how the currency swap actually take place among different currency, how the transaction or exchange of currency take place, how the exchange of interest payments that take place, and also when the actually currency swap operate, what are the problems are there, what are the disadvantages are there, we will be discussing in the current session. Let us move to the currency swap. So, what actually meaning of swap? We discussed earlier session, swap, the literally meaning is exchange. Exchange means here the exchange means the underlying asset. We are exchanging underlying asset. The underlying assets are maybe assets or liability. On that basis, swap design. A swap primarily is a financial transaction in which two counterparty agree to exchange stream of cash flow over a period of time. All swaps involves exchange of a series of periodic payments between two parties, usually through an intermediary, which normally a large financial institution, which help in bringing the two party and maintaining the record of swap transaction, what we generally call swap books. Swaps are customized product, and primarily swaps are OTC or over the counter product. They are customized as per the requirement of two party. When you mention the OTC and customized product, the customization takes place on the value size of the swap, the payment period, it is annually, quarterly or the half yearly, and also which of the currency involved in case of currency swap. On that basis, we can design or customize the swap as per the requirement of the two party. When you mention swap is a OTC product, the risk is quite high. A risk in the form of counterparty defaulting. When one party default, another party, it create a default risk for the other party, and in case of swap, whenever there is a, since it is OTC product, when the counterparty become default, it create high risks, and this is the one of the major drawback of swap transaction, whether it is a interest rate swap or currency swap. However, in many countries, the intermediary, which is the financial institution, generally a financial institution which act as a intermediary between two party, they provide some kind of counterparty guarantee, but that kind of counterparty guarantee by the intermediary is rarely available. So, swap transaction always have the drawback of counterparty default, and however, despite having a default, the swap transaction are very useful in exchange of what is called as a exchange of currency risks, in exchange of converting interest rate of fixed interest rate to floating interest rate and vice versa. In also in case of currency swap, it is very useful for company which are not having a presence in different developed market. They can exchange the currency of US dollar or Japanese yen or euro, being a part of the developing country by going for a currency swap transaction with other party which are very much prevalent in developed country. Currency swap market is quite active, and all long term borrowings are there, generally take place through currency swap. The currency swap or the current currency swap, if you analyze the history of the current currency swap, it is very recent. The first currency swap was transaction took place in 1982 between World Bank and IBM. The first currency swap, that IBM and World Bank they signed the first currency swap. Swaps, it is a currency swap or interest rate swap, these are plain vanilla, means there is no complexity involved in this process. They are plain vanilla currency swap involved in exchange of principal and fixed interest payment on a loan in one currency for a principal and a fixed interest payment for a similar loan in another currency. Where the underlying asset is currency, the currency are two different currency, and the basic payments are principal exchange and also interest payment exchange, which are denominated in two different currency. That is the basic transaction process of a currency swap. The currency swap, the payments involve the fixed principal payments and also the variable interest payment which involve in the transaction process of currency swap. The party to a currency swap will exchange principal amount at the beginning and end of the swap. When the swap actually takes place, that beginning of the swap, the two party exchange the principal, and end of the swap, the two party again exchange, reverse the transaction, exchange again the same principal. However, till the validity of the swap, they exchange the they exchange what is the cash flow, which is nothing but the interest payment. So, currency swap are generally resorted to by party who need a different currency for financing assets, but can raise resources in different currency in a different market on more competitive terms. Because currency swap, the two parties are involved, one party, the two parties have a dominant rule in their own country, in their own region. However, they can raise the resources in their own region as cheap as possible, but they are not in a position, they may need some currency of other country. So, in this process they exchange the currency, and since they are dominant position in their own country, own region, they can raise the resources their in the form of their domestic currency in a cheap rate, but they are not in a position to raise resources from other country at cheap rate. So, they exchange the currency among themselves. Swap transaction is beneficial for the two party, because it is not a zero sum game, it is a positive sum game where both party get benefit out of the transaction process. Because of their market share or the predominant position, a company may be better known in one market and can raise resources at lowest possible cost. And since the company, the presence having there in domestic market on a particular country, so they can raise resources in domestic currency very cheap, but they may not be in a position to raise resources in other country currency or foreign currency at the cheap rate. So, they exchange the transaction, and this process the swap books or swap transaction take place. If you analyze the process of swap, there are three different steps involved in the currency swap transaction process. First process, exchange of equivalent amount of different currency, that is the principal transaction. The two party agreed for to sign the swap contract. So, first transaction take place among them, exchange of what is called currency, that is the principal transaction. Then exchange of periodic interest payment during the life of the swap. The life of the swap, because they raise resources in a different currency, so different interest rate, so they should exchange the interest payment also. The interest payment continue in a periodic term in the life of the swap. Then re-exchange of principal amount at a predetermined rate on the maturity of swap. When the swap books close, the swap period ends, then again re-exchange the principal or the fixed amount at a particular rate decided by themselves. So, that rate may be current prevailing rate that time, or that may be some other rate as designed in the swap transaction process or decided in the swap transaction process. So, there are three steps in swap transaction. First step is the principal transaction, the two party agree to transfer the principal. Second step, the two party agree to exchange the periodic payment, that is interest payment, and then third step, when the swap transaction closes, that time they exchange the principal among themselves as a rate decided by themselves, which may be a current at that time prevailing rate, or may be some decided rate as designed in the swap transaction process. To understand the swap, we have to go through different examples, because without example you cannot understand the process of swap, designing of the swap. Suppose here I have given an example to you. A Japanese company wanted to raise US dollar loan, but it is not getting good response in US market. At the same time, a US based company wanted to set up a manufacturing plant in Japan, is not getting Japanese yen at competitive rate in Japan. US based company can raise US dollar at 5.5% from US market, and the Japanese company can raise yen loan at 3.75% from Japanese market. Illustrate with diagram the transaction of currency swap between two companies. Here the beneficial process are there, because two parties are involved, two parties are in disadvantage in their they have advantage in their own country, but they are disadvantage in each other country. So, now they can go for a transaction, a swap transaction. So, here two party, one Japanese company, the company wanted US dollar, if they wanted to raise US dollar from US market, they are not getting good response. Another company in US, that company wanted to have a manufacturing plant in Japan, they need yen, but they are not getting yen at a competitive rate. So, the Japanese company can get yen in Japan at a cheap rate 3.75. The US company can get US dollar in US at 5.5% as a competitive rate. So, now they can exchange the currency and they can sign a swap contract, because both the swap contract would be beneficial to two party. How the process will take place? The process may be in the form of two transactions, one transaction is principal transaction, another transaction is interest payment transaction. So, as I mentioned in the lecture, in swap transaction take place three different phases. First phase is the transaction of principal, second phase is the exchange of what is called periodic payment, that is interest payment, and third phase re-exchange of principal at a determined rate. So, first transaction, this company can raise resources in their own respective market and then exchange those currency to fund their requirement, and this can be accomplished through currency swap. Let the Japanese company raise Japanese yen at 3.75, let the US company raise US dollar at 5.5% in US market. After that, let them exchange the principal among each other and also exchange the interest payment among each other. In this process, swap transaction can take place. After the maturity date, both company re-exchange again principal, that is yen will be paid by the Japanese company, yen will be paid by the US company, and dollar will be paid by the Japanese company. In this process, the currency swap transaction can take place. If you see the process here, the process is first the US company, first the principal transaction may take place. So, principal transaction first phase, step 1, the principal transaction. The principal transaction will take place in step 1. In the principal transaction, what will happen? The two party will be there. The US company and here Japanese company. So, what will happen? This US company will raise US dollar, loan and give the US dollar loan to Japanese company at the 5.5%, and Japanese company will raise yen loan, yen denominated loan, and give this loan amount to US company at 3.75%. So, that yen principal and the principal transaction take place here, yen principal US dollar principal will go to the Japanese company and yen principal will go to the US company. So, principal transaction, yen principal will go to US company, yen principal will go to the this principal will go to the US company, and this US dollar principal go to Japanese company. However, US dollar raised by the US dollar loan raised by the US company in US market, Japanese yen loan raised by Japanese company in Japanese market. So, these two principal transactions close here, but US company raised the US dollar at 5.5%, the dollar is going to Japanese company, and hence Japanese company will pay the periodic interest of 5.5% US dollar interest rate, US dollar denominated interest rate, and give the interest rate to US company paid to the loan, those who have financed the loan. Similarly, in Japanese yen 3.75% interest rate which raised by the Japanese company and the principal has given to US company need to pay 3.75 now. So, this will go to the Japanese company who has financed the Japanese loan. So, now second phase is the phase of interest payment. Second phase is the phase of now the swap transaction has taken place for principal side, step 1, that is principal swapped. Here principal amount swapped, principal amount has been swapped. Now, second is periodic interest payment need to be swapped. So, periodic interest payment, so second step 2 involve interest payment swap. Interest payment set, you have to understand that the interest payment will be respective currency denominated in respective currency. In Japanese yen, it will be paid in Japanese yen only. In case of US dollar interest rate, it will be paid in US dollar only. So, the currency exchange during the interest payment will be respective currency only. So, the interest payment will take place what? The company here US company, US dollar company, here Japanese yen company. So, when but US dollar raised by US company at what rate? US dollar loan at 5.50%, and here Japanese yen raised by Japanese company yen loan at 3.75%, but this yen has been transferred to US company and dollar has been transferred to Japanese company. So, the dollar has gone to here and EH has gone to here. Then who will pay the interest? So, for yen denominated loan, the US company will pay the interest. For US dollar denominated loan, the Japanese company will pay the interest. So, here transaction will be just reverse. So, here the Japanese company will pay 5.5% US dollar denominated interest, it will transfer to US company and US company will pay to the respective financier. Here same thing, but in case of Japanese yen loan, that is 3.75% of yen denominated loan, yen denominated interest rate paid by US dollar US company and transferred to Japanese company again transferred to the respective financier. The transaction take place in this way. So, since US dollar has moved to Japanese company will pay US dollar denominated interest rate, that is 5.5%. Yen has been transferred to US company will pay 3.75% of yen denominated currency to Japanese company. The reverse, this transaction is interest payment, this will be periodic transaction till the swap period is not over. Yes, they have signed a swap period of 10 years and they are supposed to pay interest annually, this transaction will take place annual basis. And here the currency interest will be paid in respective currency only. So, there is no need of conversion of currency yen to dollar or dollar to yen here. So, here the interest payment is periodic in nature. Now, then step 3 re-exchange of principal. After the swap period over, re-exchange of principal. So, here same thing, re-exchange of principal will take place, the two company will be here, the company now re-exchange of again swap will take place in principal payment. After the swap period over, the swap period overs mean the respective company need to repay the principal. So, Japanese yen loan now US dollar company, Japanese yen company. So, principal again what will happen, the transaction reverse transaction take place here, because your transaction now step 3 principal re-exchange will take place. How Japanese yen has taken dollar. So, he will transfer the principal amount of dollar to US company. US company has taken yen, he transfer the principal amount of yen to the Japanese company, and after receiving the yen loan principal amount, Japanese company will repay the loan principal amount loan. After receiving the dollar loan from the Japanese company, the US company repay the principal to the respective company. So, this reverse transaction take place here. The earlier transaction, if you see, earlier transaction was just opposite. Step 1 transaction was there where the principal was exchanged from US dollar, the principal was going to Japanese company, and yen loan the principal was going to US company. But in step 3 the yen will be transferred to Japanese company and dollar will be transferred to US company, reverse transaction of principal as a determined exchange rate. Suppose that time they decided that the dollar transfer will be current rate, the current rate they will transfer the rate. So, it is up to them how to decide the exchange rate of final transaction process. Generally the exchange rate decided by the prevailing market rate. Prevailing market rate they will decide the exchange rate. This is the process of transaction of currency swap. The process involves 3 steps as I mentioned. The first step is principal exchange, second step is the exchange of periodic payment of what is called your interest rate, and third step involve re-exchange of principal at a determined exchange rate. This is the actual process of transaction of currency swap. All these transactions maintained through a swap book, and the swap book will be handled by the intermediary, generally a financial institution. In real world the party do not know each other. They come to a bank or a financial institution provide a swap transaction to them. So, they do not know who is the party, they provided the currency to them. So, it is a financial institution who act as intermediary and they maintain the swap book, they arrange the swap contract, and also they get a fee for that commission for that swap transaction process. So, entire transaction process take place through a financial intermediary, and big bank, very big bank, they act as a swap transaction process and they act as intermediary, they maintain the swap running book and get the commission income for the swap transaction process. If you do another transaction, suppose we will do another real example here. If you go through the example, a company A US firm, a company B a European firm have 5 years debt exposure equivalent to $50 million US. Both the company company A US firm and company B a European firm, they have 5-year debt exposure of equivalent to 50 million $. As on January 1, 2010, the exchange rate is $1.25 per euro. The dollar denominated interest rate is 7.25 and the euro denominated interest rate is 4.50. Arrange a currency swap and decide the payment after 1 year if the exchange rate is $1.40 per euro as on 1st January 2011. A transaction process is what? There are two companies, one company is US firm, another company is a European company. They have 5-year debt equivalent amount of 50 million $. As on January 1, 2010, the exchange rate between US dollar and US dollar and euro is 1.25 $, per euro. The dollar interest rate is 7.25, the euro interest rate is 4.5. You have to arrange a currency swap, and currency swap as you have to arrange as on January 1, 2011, when the exchange rate is 1.40 euro, $1.40 per euro. So, here the two company, two different currency, the amount of transaction is 50 million, two different interest rate, one is the dollar interest rate, another euro interest rate. Now, you have to arrange a currency swap. So, currency swap first step transaction of principal. What is the involvement of principal here? 50 million $. 50 million $, they have to transaction take place. Now, question is here, what is the transaction process take? Principal, what is the amount of principal? 50 million. What is the euro equivalent of 50 million? So, you have to decide about the euro equivalent of 50 million. So, what is the current rate? Current rate is 1.25. Decide how much can be 1.25, 50 by 1.25, that is the euro equivalent of dollar. Then after dollar will go to the European company and euro will go to the US company. The principal transaction close here, but euro interest is 4.5, dollar interest is 7.25. Now, on this rate the interest payment take place. After the end of the swap period, the exchange of principal take place at what rate? 1.40 euro per dollar, $1.40 per euro. On that rate, exchange of principal will take place. So, three different steps involved here. Let us do the problem. Now, first problem, transaction of currency. So, company A US firm and company B is euro firm. So, now 50 million is the principal amount. The principal amount is 50 million. So, what is the equivalent of principal? So, 50 million principal amount. Principal amount is US dollar 50 million. Current rate, current spot rate is 1.25 $ per euro. The what is the equivalent of 50 million $? 50 million US dollar is equivalent to how much? 50 by 1.25, 50 by 1.25, that is 40 million euro, because current rate is 1 euro is 1.25, the equivalent of 50 million $, is 40 million euro. Now, question is who will raise what? The US company will raise, the US company will raise US dollar 50 million and European company will raise euro 40 million. Euro 40 million, because 50 million equivalent of $50 million equivalent to 40 million euro. Now, after that the transaction takes place among these two. Now, question is, first transaction will be what? Principal transaction, step 1, principal swap. So, here you draw the diagram. US company and European company, US company will raise how much? US dollar 50 million, and Japanese European company will raise euro 40 million. Then what European company will send the euro to 40 million euro to the US company. US company send that exchange that 50 million US dollar to Japanese European company. Principal over the 40, 50 are same amount, equivalent amount same. So, transaction, the US company will raise from the US market 50 million US dollar, European company will raise from the European market 40 million euro. The 40 million euro they will exchange sent to the US company, and US dollar 50 million will be sent to the European company, the principal transaction over. Then question is here, the European company, your US company raising 50 million US dollar at what rate? 7.25%, and European company raising euro 40 million at 4.5% interest rate. Then second transaction, who will pay 7 US dollar interest rate? European company, because they have got the US dollar. Who will pay 40 million euro loans interest rate? It has gone to US company will pay. So, the interest transaction will take place, 7.25% of US dollar interest rate will be paid by European company, and 4.5% of euro loan interest rate will be paid by the US company. The transaction of second transaction, that is step 2 transaction of interest payment, will be like that. So, if you see that diagram here, the US company A, US market, he will raise 50 million send to company B, European market, and then European company B will raise 40 million euro and give it to company A in US. The principal transaction is over, as I mentioned here. Now, second transaction, second step will be our interest payment transaction. Second step, interest rate transaction or interest rate swap. Interest rate swap, now same thing. Here US company, here European company, US company has raised 50 million US dollar at 7.25%, and European company has raised 40 million euro 40 million at 4.5%. So, now the interest rate transaction will take place. So, interest rate transaction, as I mentioned, the 4.5% will be paid by US company and 7.25 will be paid by the European company. Now, what is the amount here? Amount here, every year the transaction will take place. Suppose the annual transaction of interest rates are involved, periodic payment is annualized. So, annual transaction will take place. So, what is the interest rate? the interested company A will pay, if you do in a calculation process, the interested of 50 million into 7.25. So, 40 million into 7.25, 7.25 into 50 million, 50 million is US dollar, is US dollar equivalent of 3.625 million. The 7.25 of 50 million is 3.625 million US dollar, and 4.5% of 40 million euro will be 4.5 percentage into 40. So, that is equivalent to euro, that is equivalent to euro 1.8 million. So, company A, company US company will pay how much interest? Interest amount will be, interest amount to European company, how much interest? 1.80 million euro, and European company will pay how much? European company will pay US dollar 3.625 million. That transaction will take place, and what is the rate? They have to pay only in respective currency only. So, they will, US company will pay 1.80 million of euro to the European company, and European company will pay 3.625 US dollar million US dollar to US company. What is the rate they will pay? The rate is already given to you, the rate is 1.40 per dollar, 1.40 for euro. The transaction, the interest payment transaction will take place what rate? So, company A that is US company, US company will pay 50 million, 40 million euro, 40 million into 4.5%, that is euro 1.80 million, and company B that is European company, it will pay US dollar 50 million into 7.25 percentage equivalent to US dollar 3.625 million. So, but the exchange will be, exchange rate will be 1.40 per euro, So, 1.40 per euro, the transaction will take place at this rate, and company A will send 1.80 million of euro to company European company, and European company will pay 3.625 million to the company B, which is company B, that is company A, that is a US company. The transaction will take place in this way. And step 3 transaction, step 3 transaction is nothing but that, step 3 transaction is nothing but the principal payment will be there in step 3 transaction process. The step 3 transaction process, same step 3 repayment of principal, now as I mentioned earlier, the company A and company B, the company A US company, US dollar company, company B will be your European company, the principal transaction will take place. The principal transaction, the European company will repay US dollar 50 million, and the US company will repay euro 40 million and spot rate, the rate of transaction will take place US dollar 1.1 1.40 per euro. The rate of dollar take place 1.40 euro. The euro now 1.40. So, 1.40 euro the prevailing rate is 1.40 euro, that rate 1.40 dollar per euro, that rate the transaction take place. What does it mean? 50 million European company will pay dollar 50 million to US company repay euro 40 million to European company at the rate of current transaction rate of 1.40 per 1.40 dollar per euro. That means 1.40 into 50 million, 1.40 into 50, that will be transaction per European side, and 50 divided by 1.40, that will be European transaction per dollar side. So, that is a transaction last step 3 transaction, rearrangement of principal amount will be there. So, now this is the process of what is called transaction of what is our currency swap. Currency swap, as I mentioned, there are 3 different transactions take place. One transaction is principal transaction, second transaction is a periodic interest payment transaction, and third transaction is again repayment of principal at a contracted rate. So, question is here, what is the process involved in currency swap? Currency swap, the process is 2 different processes. First process is a interest rate swap, second process is a currency principal swap. So, currency swap itself composed of interest rate swap and currency swap together, and in this process it is helpful in particularly long term borrowing of corporate. The corporate are inexperienced in other country compared to their own country. They can raise resources in their own country, own domestic money, but they when required foreign currency from other country, they may be disadvantaged. So, they go for a currency swap side, which is helpful for them in getting cheap resources, and this currency swap generally take place through a intermediary, and intermediary in real life is a financial institution who maintain the swap record or swap book. To understand further swap transaction, currency swap transaction, you can go through, references are here, you can go through this unique international financial management, you can go through the multinational financial management by Jeb Madura, and also you can go through multinational financial management by Alan Shapiro. So, there we will be in a position to understand further what is the actual process of transaction of currency swap. These are the references for you. If you the model question, I have framed 2 different questions, one is theoretical question, another is here, another is a problem for us. In theoretical question you can discuss with example and diagram features of currency swap. So, here you will discuss how the currency swap features are there, which are features primarily the currency swap. You have to mention that currency swap there are two different swap together in currency swap. One is interest rate swap, another is currency exchange swap. In case of currency swap, the 2 party they exchange the currency principal amount in the first step, second step they exchange the periodic interest amount, and third step they re-exchange again the principal, and what way it is beneficial for the 2 party, you have to outline that. The 2 parties are in different country, so they have advantage disadvantage in raising the foreign currency, and they have the advantage in raising resources in their own currency cheap amount, they have disadvantage raising resources from other country at cheap amount. So, they exchange the currency among themselves. The currency swap transaction take place through intermediary. The intermediary arrange a swap transaction between 2 party. The 2 party may not know each other. However, through the financial institution they meet, they sign the contract, and in the process of contract they arrange the currency swap transaction among themselves. You have to mention that in currency swap transaction how actually transaction take place, 3 different transactions take place. You outline that 3 different transactions with diagram. Now, second question is here a problem aspect. You enter into a 5-year fixed rate fixed for fixed currency swap to receive a cash flow stream in British pound to pay cash flow stream US dollar. The swap is at market swap based on a notional principal of 1 million. What are the cash flow of the swap if the 5-year market yields are 5.50 for US dollar and 9% for British pound, and the spot exchange rate is currently $1.5 per British pound. Here question is 5-year fixed for fixed currency swap. So, here notional amount is 1 million, US dollar rate is 5.5 and pound sterling rate is 9%. You have to create a cash flow stream for arrangement of this currency swap. What is the process involved? The process is here, the cash flow stream you would pay consists of interest payment. So, 1 million interest for 5.5 US dollar is $55,000 and for 5 years plus principal amount 1 million. The cash flow stream would be received based on the sterling denominated bond with principal amount equivalent to 1 million. In case of pound sterling side, the dollar equivalent will be 1 million at exchange rate 1.5. The principal amount will be 66 triple that is will be 666,667 pound sterling, and the coupon interest rate is 9%. So, 9% of the equivalent is 60,000 pound sterling. The 5-year and the principal amount is at the 5th year. So, here there is a fixed two parties are there, two different transactions are there, one transaction involved in pound sterling, another transaction involved in the US dollar. The principal amount here, principal amount is 1 million US dollar. So, US dollar interest rate is US dollar interest rate is 5.50% and pound sterling interest rate is 9%. But 1 million of US dollar equivalent to how much pound sterling? The exchange rate is spot rate is $1.50 per pound sterling. So, what is US dollar 1 million equivalent to 1 by 1.5, that is pound sterling equivalent to 666,667. This is the equivalent of here. This is the principal. The principal transaction is, this is the principal amount 1 million pound sterling and this is the principal amount of US dollar. The transaction takes place after 5 years, this is the principal transaction. Now, what will be the interest transaction? Interest transaction in US dollar will be at rate of 5.5. So, US dollar 1 million into 5.5, that is equivalent to US dollar 55,000 every year per year. For how many years? The transaction is for 5 years. Similarly, for pound sterling interest rate, that is 666,667 into pound sterling 9%, that is equivalent to pound sterling of how much? 60,000 per year for 5 years. So, the company two different transaction cash flow, one is 1 million US dollar, after 5 year they have to repay the 1 million US dollar and every year 55,000 US dollar as interest amount. Similarly, for equivalent of yen, equivalent of pound sterling, it is at the rate of 1.5. So, equivalent of principal amount is this and and 9% interest in pound sterling, 60,000 every year equivalent amount. This is the final transaction and cash flow among the two party. The two party will transact the cash flow every year 55,000 pound sterling, $55,000 and 60,000 pound sterling in the form of interest. At the end of 5 year, $1 million US and 666,667 pound sterling will be exchanged as per the principal exchange. Thank you. You can read more further for currency swap in as the references given to you. Thank you.